My name is Rachel Wilby. I served as the quantitative lead for this project, and I will be the moderator for today's discussion. I'd like to start by introducing the rest of my colleagues from Corporation for a Skilled Workforce who will be participating in today's discussion. We have Jenny Poole from our Competencies and Credentials team, who served as the project lead and qualitative lead on this work. Alex Breen and Chris Shannon from our Improving Practices and Outcomes team, who both provided a critical practitioner lens and lit review of what works in the field. And finally, Joy Briscoe, the director of our Improving Practices and Outcomes team, who also supported with the practitioner's lens. Now I'm going to hand it over to Joy to share a bit more about CSW and the origins of this work.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you so much, Rachel. As she mentioned, my name is Joy Briscoe, and I serve as the director of the Improving Practices and Outcomes team at a Corporation for Skilled Workforce. We are so glad that you could join us today for this conversation on the Young Adult Workforce Landscape Analysis, or for what those of us on the team refer to as YAWLA. So before we jump into the findings, I want to start with two simple questions. Why this research and why now? Across the country, the landscape for the young adults navigating education and employment is changing quickly. Technology is reshaping how work happens, employers are redefining the skills they need, and young adults are moving through increasingly complex pathways between education, training, and careers. At the same time, workforce organizations are being asked to do more than ever. They're responding to shifting policy priorities, evolving employer needs, and growing expectations from learners and communities, often while operating with limited resources. So the questions we wanted to explore was this. How is the youth and young adult workforce field adapting? And what do organizations need to strengthen pathways to economic mobility moving forward? This sits at the center of the young adult workforce landscape analysis. This work builds on the mission and long-standing experience of the Corporation for Skilled Workforce, or CSW, which this year celebrates 35 years of advancing workforce innovation and systems change. CSW is a national nonprofit focused on strengthening workforce systems and improving job quality so more people can access pathways to economic mobility. YAWLA also reflects collaboration across CSW's 5 strategy teams: our federal, state, and local systems change team that works with policymakers and systems leaders to strengthen workforce policy and align public systems, our research and evaluation team who generates and interprets the data that informs field learning, our competencies and credential team that focuses on how skills, frameworks, and credential transparency connect learning and work, our trauma and resilience at work team that supports organizations in creating environments that help workers and learners succeed in long-term strategies. And lastly, the team that hosted this initiative, our Improving Practices and Outcomes team, which works directly with workforce organizations to strengthen program design, implementation, and outcomes. One example of IPO's work around outcomes is our signature offering, the Workforce Benchmarking Network, or WBN. The WBN is a national learning community of workforce organizations committed to improving outcomes and advancing equity. At the center of the network is the WBN National Survey, which houses one of the largest national data sets on workforce program participants, services, and results. Since 2008, the survey has collected data from more than 500 workforce programs, and today, the WBN community includes over 300 organizations across 62 cities and 27 states. Through the WBN, organizations compare data with peers, analyze outcomes, and learn together about strategies that improve results for job seekers and workers. YAWLA builds on that foundation, combining national survey insights with practitioner perspectives gathered through focus groups and field conversations to better understand what organizations across the country are experiencing today. We are deeply grateful to the many workforce organizations and practitioners who contributed their insights to this effort. With that context in mind, we're excited to share what we've learned, Rachel, back over to you. Let's go ahead and dive into YAWLA.
Thank you, Joy. So our agenda today starts with a brief grounding in the methodology and who participated. From there, we'll move into the core of our time together, which is meaning making with the researchers. We'll open things up for Q&A towards the end, so please feel free to submit questions at any point using the Q&A feature here in Zoom. And finally, we'll wrap with some actionable recommendations for practitioners, funders, and policymakers. The full deck and recording for this session today will be available within a few days. So about our methodology, CSW used a mixed methods design. First, we gathered survey responses from 207 organizations nationwide. To deepen and contextualize those findings, we held focus groups with 86 practitioners. In total, this analysis incorporates insights from 229 unique participants. Survey respondents represent 44 states, Washington, D.C., and 6 organizations have a national footprint. The top 4 states responding to the survey include New York, California, Texas, and Washington State. Focus group participants represented 21 states and Washington, D.C. Overwhelmingly, the majority of participating organizations identified as nonprofit or community-based organizations. But we also heard from other organization types, such as formal workforce system entities and youth development organizations. Organizations varied by size from 20 or fewer staff to over 500 and all served young people ages 18 to 29. Understanding the methodology helps us see the breadth of the voices behind this work. Now, let's turn to what those voices reveal. Jenny, Chris, and Alex are ready to dig in with me to reveal what the findings actually tell us. So let's move into the meaning-making portion of our session. As we move through each finding, we'll look at where we're seeing wins in strategies and approaches, where organizations are encountering challenges or constraints, how you might use these findings as a point of benchmarking for your own work, and where to go deeper in this report and in related CSW resources. So let's start with our first finding. Mental health emerged as an essential program support. Nearly 1/3 of organizations noted they currently provide mental health or substance abuse support as a service to participants. But at the same time, 36% named mental health as one of their biggest service gaps. Jenny, given this mix, what did practitioners say is really driving the need, what's working, and where do funding or capacity constraints most get in the way?
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. In the survey, we heard that many programs are responding by expanding mental health supports and by leaning heavily on case managers as a key support helping young adults navigate barriers and persistent employment. What practitioners told us in focus groups really reinforces this. One of the strongest themes we heard was how much the needs of young adults have shifted in recent years, actually over the past 5 years, particularly around mental health and social emotional needs. Practitioners consistently describe seeing higher levels of anxiety, stress, and substance use among the young adults they serve. And many connected this directly to the disruptions young people experienced during the pandemic. As a result, workforce programs are increasingly being asked to support participants, not just in gaining skills for employment, but also in navigating mental and physical health barriers that can make it difficult to persist in training and employment. So in response, many organizations are adapting their program models. Some are bringing mental health supports directly in-house, so hiring social workers or behavioral health specialists. Others are building partnerships that allow participants to access counseling and related services while they're enrolled, and sometimes even after they complete the program. But what practitioners emphasized most strongly, I would say, is perhaps the role of sustained relationship-based support, so one-on-one support for young adults. Case managers, navigators, and coaches were consistently described as the single most important service programs provide. These staff members are often the ones helping young adults troubleshoot challenges, mediate workplace and life issues, and stay connected after placement so participants can succeed. And if you check out the report, you can hear a lot more about this relationship-based support. We describe in the report is through lots of examples, a field that understands what works when it comes to relationship-based support and holistic services, but is also at the same time navigating how to scale and breed resources to meet the pressing needs that young adults have.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Jenny. Alice, given what we see in the data, the growing mental health needs, limited capacity to offer supports, and mental health showing up as a top service gap, what are the most practical steps programs can take to respond?
Yeah, great question, Rachel. So in addition to the work that CSW did on YAWLA, engaging with 229 organizations providing workforce services across the country, CSW has also done extensive work with individuals navigating the workforce system who describe just how disruptive it is to have a staff member be the point of contact during the orientation period, be then passed over to someone during the training period, and then be contacted by someone they may not have ever heard from or have a relationship with the question, do you have a job? How much do you make? And can you provide me with your wage stubs? So we've heard a lot of examples of organizations that are doing a point of contact approach and somebody having a single individual that's shepherding them throughout the process. One best practice I'd like to uplift is that of RealWorks, a Brooklyn organization who started having their retention specialists start to enter the frame as early as the info session and be a consistent presence in the classroom, really conveying to individuals the reason for those contacts and making available and making widely known the supportive services that were being provided. I've seen a lot of other organizations that are really prioritizing intensifying services at the point of a transition from a training program into a job or from a job into a better job. I think we're hearing pretty persistently that separation of entry-level talent is not happening due to technical skills deficits, but it is happening because life challenges do not stop, even if someone has a highly coveted job and is working full-time with benefits. So organizations that can really provide supports to individuals in a way that is flexible, in a way that is accessible. During the focus groups and in conversations with individuals participating in CSW facilitated learning communities, we've heard from organizations where if an individual calls out from work in their first 30, their first 60, their first 90 days, that'll trigger a call to a benefit navigator that can then reach out to the participant or even deliver on-site supportive services. So it's really making it as employers know how expensive and how costly turnover is. And this to me reflects kind of a true partnership between workforce organizations and the employers that they partner with. The final point that I would emphasize is there is very little awareness in the workforce system of employer subsidized supports like employee assistance programs, grief counseling programs, sometimes even things like work-life partnership in Denver and the clinical social workers that they make available to so many different businesses, and educating employers on the access to new benefits that they gain through gaining employment is hugely effective.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex. And I do just want to double click on, as Joy mentioned previously, we have a trauma and resilience work here at CSW, and there are these awesome quick guides that are available that kind of help organizations begin that work around becoming more trauma informed and resilience building organizations. So that's a really great resource to sign up for as well. So I'd like to move on to our next topic. In today's labor market, interest in entrepreneurship is growing, but only a limited number of organizations are expanding their work readiness curricula to include entrepreneurial skills such as budgeting, marketing, and other fundamentals that help young adults move from an idea to a viable venture. Jenny, based on what you heard in the focus groups, how are practitioners trying to meet this growing interest in entrepreneurship while also grappling with the realities of a gig economy?
Yeah, so thanks for that, Rachel. What practitioners described in focus groups is that programs are increasingly trying to meet young adults where they're at by integrating entrepreneurship into programs, though there are also tensions that come up. So I know entrepreneurship did come up a handful of times in the survey, but where it really became more visible was in the focus groups, where our practitioners talked about the growing interest they're seeing amongst young adults in the forms of flexible and directed forms of work. So practitioners talked about a noticeable shift in how young adults are thinking about work. So alongside interests in stable fields like healthcare and IT, many young people are also looking for autonomy, flexibility, and the ability to shape their own career paths, whether that's through freelancing, contracting, or eventually running their own businesses. And in response, programs are beginning to build this interest more intentionally into pathways. So practitioners described helping young adults connect skills they gain in areas like trades, hospitality, and technical fields to opportunities for contracting, freelancing, or business ownership. So some organizations are also expanding training in things like business fundamentals. So things like budgeting, marketing, and client management. And young adults have a particular interest in social media roles. And so a few programs are also creating earn while you learn models where participants are providing social media services to local businesses. At the same time, practitioners talked about attention they're helping young adults navigate. Many participants come to programs facing immediate needs. So stable income, benefits, housing, access to social services, which don't necessarily align with the realities of starting up a business or honestly becoming an influencer. And as one of the practitioners described it in one of our focus groups, young people today can pull out their phone and see highly visible examples of influencers and entrepreneurs online, which can shape expectations about how quickly success happens and how it can happen in sort of this online space. There are also tensions with what programs offer. So many are focused on pathways that are not tied to gig work and more so to long-term stable career pathways that are maybe a little more traditional or historic or visible, which, stability is also something that young adults are coming to programs saying they want, right? So part of the work programs and practitioners are doing is helping young adults think about sequencing. And this includes stabilizing through training, job placement, and access to wraparound supports first, while continuing to build the skills, experience, and other kinds of footing that can support longer term entrepreneurship goals.
Great. Thanks, Jenny. I love that both and piece, right? That organizations are trying to bring in. Chris, as we think about this, as programs try and meet this moment where young adults are excited about entrepreneurship, but may also have some misconceptions about what mobility actually looks like, what do practitioners share about how to support that interest in a realistic but developmentally appropriate way?
Apologies, that space bar just wasn't working for me today. Thank you for that question. We're seeing, in addition to a lot of things that Jenny highlighted, one of the things that we're seeing is when young adults come to organizations and say, well, I want to be an entrepreneur. I'm not interested in construction or healthcare. Organizations are kind of leaning into a both and approach and showing that the occupational training is actually providing them with really sound technical foundation skills that are needed to pursue business ownership, which a lot of times is a very strong career pathway for a lot of young adults. But at the same time, if they add entrepreneurship programming, they're also highlighting the transferable skills, especially the soft skills, the business skills, the marketing, everything that Jenny mentioned before, as something that would strengthen their success in more traditional careers. So I'm adding or partnering to include like an owning your own business component in new or existing training, so participants can kind of understand how occupational skills can translate into freelance work, small business ownership, or side ventures. They're also creating spaces, Rachel, to explore entrepreneurship by offering workshops, idea labs, or project-based activities where young adults can kind of test those business ideas and learn foundational concepts like marketing, pricing, customer engagement. For example, one program talked to us about how their participants actually provide fee-based services to businesses around web design and business support, so which I thought was kind of interesting. And then finally, they're bringing folks in who can help provide that first person experience in terms of being an entrepreneur. Anyone who runs a workshop, it's like you can say something till you're blue in the face, but when a stranger walks into the training room and says it, all the young adults go, "Oh, why didn't you tell us that?" So they're bringing in those experts from the field, the established entrepreneurs, so that they can share their path to business ownership, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and provide them with really realistic grounding in terms of the challenges and the skills and the persistence required to build and sustain a business, and connecting them with mentors or peer mentors so that participants with individuals who recently navigated similar career pathways can kind of share what that journey was like.
Yeah, thanks so much, Chris. As a former teacher, I definitely heard from parents a lot that the message is not what matters as much as the method. So certainly bringing in people who are actually living this is probably a lot very helpful for our young people. Let's move on to our next finding, and that's around employer engagement. And that really stood out for us. Organizations with the strongest retention tended to have dedicated employer engagement staff, strong employer participation in hiring, and broad access to internships and apprenticeships. And across the field, some of the most frequent ways that employers were engaged included work-based learning, career exposure and work readiness support, and interviewing and or hiring participants. Jenny, given this high level of employer engagement we're seeing in the data, what did practitioners share in the focus groups about how that engagement is actually playing out on the ground?
Yeah, thanks for that, Rachel. So, as we saw in the survey, many organizations are investing in dedicated employer engagement staff, and practitioners describe these roles as essential to building and sustaining partnerships with employers. I know we've got lots of examples within the report itself. I just want to point out again that this is really a spotlight onto select themes and select examples. But in the focus groups, we also heard more about how programs are structuring their employer engagement along a continuum, from one-off opportunities to donate or volunteer, towards short-term activities like job fairs and other events on one end, and kind of on the other end, deeper partnerships that include providing paid internships, strong placement pathways, and co-design training. Our findings suggest that this isn't about ranking employers by how engaged they are, for example. Instead of this idea of a continuum is about giving employers multiple ways to participate based on their capacity. All of the points along this continuum can be valuable because they allow organizations to start building relationships and expand collaboration over time. And again, you can read a number of examples of this in our report. And as I mentioned, one key example is dedicated employer-facing staff who play a critical role in making this work. Practitioners describe these staff as bridging expectations between young adults and employers. These staff help to align skills with job opportunities, support internships and placements, troubleshoot challenges after hire, that came up a lot, and especially helping young adults transition successfully into employment opportunities. At the same time, I'd say that practitioners also noted that employer engagement is challenged by realities facing employers who are also navigating capacity and resource constraints, which can affect how deeply they're able to engage at any given time. And I would say this is just as true for sustained sort of prior employer partners as it is for possible new ones. So what we see in the findings is that strong employer engagement isn't just about bringing employers to the table. It's about building structured relationships over time. It's also helpful to have multiple entry points that allow employers to participate in ways that work for them while still supporting strong outcomes and opportunities for young adults.
Thanks so much, Jenny. Alex, based on what practitioners shared, what does it look like in practice to move from broad employer participation to deeper, more meaningful partnerships?
Yeah, I think this is when we were divvying up slides, this was one that I wanted to jump towards because I think there was just so many exciting examples that came from both our work coaching organizations and also what we heard from practitioners through the focus groups. I think one example really comes to mind, and that is the example of HopeWorks, an organization that is based in Camden, New Jersey, who operates a social enterprise and is really known for having deep and really robust employer engagement. And I think we spoke to a lot of organizations that have a job readiness assessment, but can't think of a single organization nationally that is centering what's contained in the rubric in that job readiness assessment in what's actually required to attain employment in their fields of focus, and also what's required to sustain employment and advance. And this is a tool that was developed in close partnership with employers and is something that is used by career coaches every week of programming with participants. One, to open up really open feedback loops and really clear dialogue about around where someone is at, where someone wants to be, and what needs to happen in order to get them there. But also, it's just a great way for people on day one to begin understanding what are the realities of what's needed in order to not just be successful in a training program, but also have that training program success translate to the labor market. I think Jenny, I really appreciate you you lifting up the different levels of partnership. I think JVS Boston has been a leader in that space for more than a decade. I think the JVS levels are something that is really widely known throughout workforce organizations, but I do think it just emphasizes how important it is to establish really clear expectations of both employer and of workforce organization in what is expected for a successful partnership. I talked earlier about if somebody misses multiple days of work, could that trigger a call to a case manager or to someone providing supportive services? I mean, so much as work is done to prepare someone for the place of employment that it seems ill-suited for that relationship and those supports to end just because someone has graduated a program and transitioned into full-time permanent employment. I think JVS is just a national leader in that space and cannot sing their praises enough. I think two other examples that jump to mind. One came from a Denver organization that was really uh, integrating day in the life programming really early, even in the first week of its industry preparedness, to really let someone know, like, is this a career and is this a program that aligns with your interests, your values, your workplace preferences? And through experiential learning opportunities like job shadowing, site visits, day in the life videos, people could see, is this actually the career for them? And it also conveys excitement and is a huge carrot to wanting to overcome natural hurdles that can interfere with successful program participation, and also just keep people's eye on the prize of this is what you will get if you successfully complete a training program. I think the last thing, given the amount of work that we've done with learners and individuals navigating the workforce system, is considering alumni as future employer partners. And I think we heard from lots of organizations that are working with alumni who've successfully transitioned into the field to better contextualize curricula, to understand what modules actually had real world application, and then to figure out kind of where were the gaps. And I think one point that Chris made in the build up to this, and I think is a point that comes through in the report, which I highly encourage everyone to check out, is we have so many alumni of these programs that are now in hiring positions who really want to pay it forward and offer opportunities. And there's no better place to look in looking to, one, establish employers of choice, but also to figure out who's going to hire our people than individuals that know firsthand how important and how effective a program has been.
Thanks so much for that, Alex. Jenny, I want to give you a chance to kind of lift up this college and employer partnership action guide. Could you speak a little bit more to that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. So, through our ASEP community of practice, which is community practice featuring community colleges, we're all engaged in trying to improve equity and sort of the student-centeredness of their employer partnerships. We really did produce a guide that has a number of actionable strategies. And the reason we lift this up too is actually all along a that continuum we've been speaking about in terms of employer engagement. This guide has strategies all along that continuum, whether you're starting a new partnership or restarting a partnership after COVID, to how you can deepen your engagement. So check it out.
Thanks so much for that, Jenny. Moving on to our next topic around integrating AI with intentionality. So, AI is an evolving, powerful, and sometimes controversial tool for all of us right now. More than half of the organizations that we spoke with see value in using AI to enhance programming or services, yet they acknowledge that they may lack the skills or staff capacity to determine how to do so effectively. Even so, we're still seeing a movement of about 35% of organizations saying that they are supporting AI skill development for their young adults, and 1 in 4 organizations also noting that they've created some internal guides around using AI responsibly. So, Jenny, you've heard the numbers on capacity, skill building, and guidelines. From the focus groups, how are practitioners experiencing AI on the ground?
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. So I'll just say first that one of the interesting things from the focus group that came up for me anyway is that AI actually came up a little bit less often than I would have expected when we asked about shifts over the past 5 years. It took a backseat to things like pressing needs that young adults are facing, including what we talked about previously around mental health. But when it did come up, it revealed some important shifts programs are beginning to navigate. And I think the quote on the slide captures an important reality facing young adults served by programs tied to the conversations coming up around AI. So, for a lot of the young adults programs serve, particularly Opportunity Youth, the challenge may not be advanced AI tools just yet, or additionally, it's access to computers, reliable internet, and foundational digital skills needed to be successful in a workplace environment. Practitioners did talk about working with young adults who may be very comfortable using smartphones, for example, but who haven't had as much exposure to workplace technologies or, even computers, things like email platforms, shared drives, Microsoft Office, kind of collaboration tools, et cetera. At the same time, AI is also beginning to enter this work for young adults in different ways. So young adults are also using AI tools to help do things that many folks are doing, draft resumes, cover letters, and job applications, which is prompting programs to rethink what job applicant readiness instruction looks like, and what skills might be the right fit in terms of AI. Employers are also increasingly expecting some level of AI or digital fluency from day one, but practitioners did note that employers themselves often struggle to articulate what specific competencies they're actually looking for. So when I hear this in my mind as a researcher, I'm like, oh, there's more research to be done around this question. But at the same time, practitioners raise concerns about how AI may be reshaping hiring and early career entry points. Automated screening tools and changes in entry-level job structures could create additional barriers for young adults who are already facing limited access to technology or professional networks. But I think what we see in the findings is that AI is emerging as an influence on training and hiring, but programs are still navigating how to incorporate technologies like this while also addressing the very real digital access gaps that many young adults face.
Thanks, Jenny. I'm glad to hear that tension came up of like, are we putting the cart before the horse? Are there some things that still need to be addressed prior to even thinking about AI? So, Chris, when hearing the data on the capacity gaps and Jenny's insights about how AI is already shaping what readiness looks like, what are you seeing as the most practical ways organizations can start experimenting with AI ethically and safely, and in ways that actually support young adults' soft skills and sector-specific needs?
Thank you so much for that. And I feel like you set that up just nicely, Rachel, because my first point is all around that ethics first approach. Survey open responses is that people are definitely leveraging when they're providing AI training, the immediate focus is really on the critical thinking and making sure that they are ethically using and integrating AI into what they do. So some organizations are actually only focused then on prompt engineering or leveraging it for mock interviews, which I found was really interesting. Along with that, there seems to be some appetite to experiment with AI as a tool for soft skill development. In the focus groups, we heard over and over again how important soft skills are. I mean, we've known that for a long time, but it continues to be a theme, and it continues to be something that employers are really looking for in their applicant, their talent pools. So organizations are incorporating AI into the program to strengthen those soft skills. This goes beyond just written and spoken communication needed for a job application process or interviews, but increasingly they're using AI for simulations, coaching, and feedback, specifically feedback, to help participants practice workplace behaviors such as communication, teamwork, professionalism, in both work-ready and sector-specific training. And one of the things that they're also finding, just to double down on that a little bit, is that feedback can also be private, which given some of the anxiety and mental health challenges that these young adults, especially through COVID, have experienced, and that social anxiety, being able to practice and get feedback privately can be very affirming. And can help them ready without having to feel judged in the process. Something else I'd like to note, Rachel, that you actually spoke about is that many survey respondents see the potential of AI, but they really lack the training to use it effectively. Piloting at the organizational level, you might be able to integrate AI organizationally. Sorry, that came out so awkwardly. But if you're not using it internally, it's hard to expect staff to use it and implement it in their programming. So building staff confidence while expanding how it is applied across programs can strengthen their capacity and can also help streamline routine tasks. So that leads right into the last two recommendations. One is just simply the more we can support practitioner learning around AI use by funding training, providing peer cohort learning opportunities, piloting opportunities to help staff apply AI tools responsibly to improve program delivery, participant support, and administrative efficiency. That's only going to improve the entire system by doing that. It also helps them troubleshoot challenges that come up rather than trying to figure it out on their own. And finally, going to the industry and occupational experts, the employers. So as Jenny and Alex talked about, like really thinking about authentic ways to engage employers, and it was mentioned that employers are kind of trying to figure this out on the fly as well. But going to them and figuring out how are they really implementing AI within their sector specific workplaces could help provide ideas to staff and create opportunities for them to make more authentic and effective simulations, tools, and kind of real world scenarios um, for participants. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. No, thanks, Chris. No, that's all super helpful. Thank you so much. As we move into our final topic, we want to name a barrier that came up everywhere in the data in the focus groups, and that's sustainable funding. This was the backdrop to nearly every conversation, shaping staffing, program caps, and the kinds of supports organizations are able to offer. More than 100 organizations identified lack of sustainable funding or financial resources as a major challenge to serving young adults. Jenny, given that funding sits underneath every finding we've discussed today, what what did practitioners share about how current funding structures shape what they can actually offer?
Yeah, Rachel, to your point, both the survey and the focus groups, again, made it very clear that funding conditions shape almost every aspect of how programs operate. And again, I'll pause here once again and just note that we have more information about how programs are funded and strategies in the report, which we hope you all will pick up and read. But in the survey and the focus groups, practitioners described operating in a constrained funding environment, often characterized by short grant cycles, tough program requirements, and compliance-driven metrics that don't always reflect the nonlinear pathways and the needs that young adults are navigating as they move through education, training, and employment. And practitioners talked about how many of the supports that make the biggest difference for young adults, things like attempts to meet basic needs, so transportation, childcare, housing, but also things like mental health services, are difficult to fund consistently and in sustained ways. And another thing that came through very clearly is the mismatch in terms of funding timelines and young adult outcomes, which is just alluding to too. Practitioners emphasize that meaningful progress for many young adults does not necessarily align with funding structures, which are built around shorter cycles and shorter term outcome definitions. Yeah, the quote on the slide here really captures this tension well. Practitioners talked about how success for young adults doesn't always follow a clean pathway. And what counts as a meaningful outcome for one young person may look very different from the way success is currently defined in many funding structures. And at the same time, practitioners highlighted the important role that flexible philanthropic funding can play, particularly when compared to maybe other public dollars that they're receiving. When funding allows programs the space to innovate, build capacity, and support young adults over longer time horizons, organizations are better able to respond to the needs that they see on the ground. So one of the broader takeaways from this research is that while programs are continuing to innovate and diversify their approaches, there's still important work to be done in the field in terms of how funding is structured and what metrics are tied to that funding, whether that's through more flexible funding models, better alignment of metrics with the realities young adults face, or stronger strategies for braiding resources across systems to support long-term success. And those are all themes that we heard about in the focus groups, and you can find in the report and also the focus group brief that we put out.
Great. Thanks so much, Jenny. So this one wasn't as clean cut of a put into practice, right, Chris? So is there anything that you'd like to add for practitioners to consider as it relates to funding?
Absolutely. And Rachel, this was very problematic in that oftentimes when challenges in workforce development systems kind of surface, folks tend to put the ownership of the solution on practitioners, and particularly around funding, that just isn't fair. They are already doing an amazing job of making so much out of the funding that they have and working with shrinking, fiscal constraints or shrinking budgets and in some places increased demand. So the only recommendation that we really had here was we're going to talk more about what funders and policymakers can do. And when we talk about funding the full cost of programming, Alex talked about having mental health supports, for example, as they transition into employment. If a funder or policymaker asks you, like, what would it cost to include that in the program? Practitioners need to be ready with an answer. So that is the most actionable item that we could think of, is just be prepared to communicate true costs of wraparound services and follow-up services that will increase retention.
Thanks so much for that, Chris. So we've reached the end of our meaning-making discussion, and we're ready to open up Q&A. Our colleague Jessica Carr, as well as the rest of the team, will be assisting as we go through these questions. And so do we have a first question for any of the panelists?
And folks can either use the raise hand feature here. Folks can enter questions through the chat. There's also the Q&A feature. I see Jess is elevating a question that came to her directly, and that is, what is one commitment you are taking forward? Jenny, do you want to take that? I'd be happy to take that if not.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll chime in after you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the mental health, we went back and recently analyzed the findings from 20 focus groups, and there was not a topic that came up with more regularity than the mental health crisis. And I think that there's some data points that are contained in the report about this particular generation and the prevalence of mental health issues in young adults and how it is so much more pronounced than it even is in youth. As well as, the fact that this number, I mean, this is a data point. Someone hopefully will check me. Otherwise, I will make up something really sensational. But it is just so much pronounced than it was 10 years ago. And I think organizational programmatic services have not necessarily been funded to reflect that added need. And I just think, yeah, I mean, this is showing up in a variety of ways. I think it's showing up in, we're seeing it in WBN survey results, where we're seeing some declines in program completion rates. I think we're seeing it continue to the point of young adults disconnecting from programs after they have graduated and attained employment. I think as a result of that, organizations are having a really difficult time telling their story and really capturing and communicating the impact of their work, or even understanding, like, is this program intervention working? And I think I have no greater takeaway than to say, like, this is issue area number one for organizations right now. But Jenny, you just wrote an incredible brief summarizing focus group findings, and I wonder, like, what is continuing to stay with you?
Yeah, actually, I would switch gears a little bit because I agree about the mental health piece, and I think we'll talk about it more. I just saw a question come into the chat, but I alluded to it in the section that we were talking about around AI, which I think actually it's not that we saw conflict. It gets a little bit to the question that was posed in the chat too about conflicting data points between focus group and the survey, but it's not that we got conflicting data points around AI in the focus group and the survey. There's just a lot more to be explored, to be supported internally, externally, and as a researcher who likes exploring, sort of themes that feel like it could use more lifting up of strategies, challenges, et cetera, it feels like there's more work to be done there. So for me personally, like I guess when I was presenting, I alluded to it a little bit in my comments around AI and sort of employers coming to programs with saying, hey, we want digital literacy, or I want folks to know AI, and then not having like a specific sort of set of competencies around that. So my mind goes there, but of course, and as we see in the chat, there's more, a lot more to be discussed around mental health too.
Thank
I
you
think
for
I,
that.
sorry, I just want to also just add really quick, Jess, because it might not seem like a tie-in, but it actually ties in beautifully to think about both AI and mental health. And when we're just thinking about young people in general, again, I'm a former teacher, and when I think about the gap in time that social distancing and virtual learning and all of those pieces, there's just going to be a lot that's missing for young workers at this point that would have traditionally been picked up through traditional schooling. So that we really just need to have that additional care, both for the mental health, both for where there might be those gaps in what we expect from a digital native, right? We expect this generation to have a better understanding of how to use different pieces of technology, and that's just not always the case. So just wanted to lift that up as well.
I would like to add one more thing that I'm thinking about and reflecting on, and that is this interesting intersectionality between the interest in entrepreneurship and how that might be met by centering youth voice in programming, by providing them with leadership and ownership opportunities and opportunities to self-advocate. I think it would get at some of the points that Jenny raised around why young adults are seeking entrepreneurship, other than, of course, it's around them 24/7. But I just wanted to raise that up before we move on to the next question.
I see that Carrie Pierce has asked, will we be making connections through this webinar to experts, or is this more of a recommendation? Carrie, in the follow-up, we can absolutely provide examples of some of the best and promising examples that we've referenced today, as well as lifting up some of the guides that we both featured in the webinar and are just commonly known as best practices.
And I'll add to that our trauma and resilience at work team actually in doing one of the trainings that we do is around how organizations can kind of have that plan in place of who can I call, who are the resources in my area that would be helpful with supporting young people on these different, whoever my participants may be, but we're focused on young people who may be available to support this need, and just making sure that you kind of have that action plan in place. And that's one of the parts of one of our trainings that we do as well. So certainly there's a lot that you could look into around our trauma and resilience at work team that might be able to also support and kind of get you on the path to getting that kind of support.
And I just want to redirect folks back to the report. The report does have a lot of links and resources listed directly in it. So I would reference that as well.
I want to make space for any other questions. And if folks want to raise hands, I can unmute. Folks want to use the primary chat feature, that is an option. And Stephen, I see your hands. And I'm going to unmute. Okay. Stephen, I've invited you to unmute.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're audible.
Excellent. So I've been thinking about the challenge of inconsistent funding for workforce development strategies and finding a mechanism for which those who benefit from the investments have a way of contributing back to that sustainable investment. I'm thinking of something like how municipalities use a bed tax to do out-of-state marketing for their economic development and tourism. We have no, the people who benefit from the tourism end up paying for it through a bed tax. It's like those who gain have to then contribute back. There seems to be no mechanism in which employers who benefit from all this workforce investment have to contribute back into a system that they are explicitly benefiting from. And I think that's a challenge within our social safety net system is there's no way of capturing those, uh, a percentage of the benefit to earned over on one side and translating it back to the people doing the work. I think about it also in like the housing world where we have all this affordable housing set aside to help reduce police and healthcare and emergency room costs, but there's no way of taking that savings from the police and fire and then refunding the housing. I think it's a similar problem. We don't have a mechanism for recapturing some of the savings, the cost savings, and reinvesting it back into our workforce models. And that's something that's been on my mind a lot is about the sustainability of this work and not constantly being dependent on private philanthropy or one-time funding opportunities coming out of federal government coffers that can sometimes be clawed back without a word's notice. So can you speak about some of that kind of as a larger policy kind of approach to removing this up and down inconsistent funding strategy that we currently are living with?
Yeah, I mean, I think the workforce system, like there is a stigma surrounding the workforce development system in many spaces. I think there has been a narrative of workforce development programs approaching employers in the way of appeasing to a sense of altruism and almost in the way of like, please take our needy, take our participants, $7.25 hour job with no benefits and unsafe working conditions, that is acceptable. I can say, speaking to personal experience, spent the 5 years before the pandemic working on pay for success models with social finance and New York Center for Youth Employment that were really focused on first establishing the cost of employee turnover and then creating performance-based contracts between workforce development organizations and employers, where if individuals would reach certain retention marks, like 3 month, 6 month, 12-month retention, that they would then pay a portion of a single instance in the cost of turnover to the organization, and those costs would then be split between the organization to serve additional participants, and there was some financial reward for the uh, individual who'd attained a job and retained employment successfully. I will say, yeah, I mean, certainly that is a challenge. Certainly that is a tension that was outside of the scope of the majority of the research that we conducted here. But I think point taken that in order to maintain this work, there needs to be the exploration of additional funding streams beyond just philanthropy and government. See an additional hand.
And this will be our
Sure.
last question. We just want to make sure that we have a little bit of time to be able to give some of those takeaways. So this will be our last question. Thank you so much.
Hello, this is Kaisha Wright Frazier, President CEO at CSW. I just want to add to what Alex was saying and to respond to Stephen. Couple 3 points. This is why I think the Workforce Benchmarking Network, which is also a project our team works on, is so important. And it's working with community-based organizations to help them collect quality data and also think about what are the metrics that matter to them and to their participants that show good outcomes and good progress. So going beyond the typical workforce outcomes, but thinking about what really matters, what makes impact, to then tell your story, give data points and proof to say this works. And with that, working with employers or other opportunities in the community, this is what we're saving the system by having that person employed. And there's some work I did years ago at the state of Michigan with the program called Welfare to Work within an employer. And we were able to show that we had saved the state nearly $2 million by that program and did some testimony and things like that, and pretty much got thanks for that work. But we've got a budget deficit. So the call was to reinvest those funds back in those kind of programs. So I think that same question is there, and it would be great to have some folks collectively come together to figure out what that solution is to be able to then have those dollars, because I really agree, put back into those programs, particularly the programs that work. So I just want to add that. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Kaisha, for hopping in there. Again, we just want to make sure we have enough time to get to some of our practical recommendations. And so I'm going to hand it over to Chris to just share some takeaways for practitioners, funders, and policymakers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rachel. So first of all, we just wanted to applaud all the practitioners. The research showed loud and clear that relational relational approaches to programming works. So we just definitely recommend that you continue to lean into that relational approach. It's so important, Rachel, as you mentioned, developmentally for young adults that they build that trusting relationship first before you jump into training and expect outcomes. Something else that came through loud and clear, and I feel like everybody heard that from both Alex and Jenny, is just the need for embedding those wraparound supports. I put training at the center with supports added when needed. But that for many young adults today, that model is flipping or starting to flip, and stabilizing supports like transportation, housing, and mental health are often becoming taking center stage, and it's what participants need in order to succeed in programming. As Alex mentioned, many organizations report strong employer engagement, but the depth and sustainability of those relationships vary. So one strategy we recommend, and I know Jenny spoke to this, is creating kind of a continuum engagement, almost like the JVS model that Alex spoke of, that will help organizations kind of meet employers where they are and build deeper partnerships over time. And then finally, we heard that many organizations they operate multiple programs with different definitions of eligibility, progress, and success. Programs within the same organization or multiple youth serving organizations within a community. And often these are driven by different funding sources, but it can create confusion and fragmented and siloed systems. Developing shared metrics can really help organizations and communities align their efforts and tell a clearer story about their collective impact. For funders, yep, there we go, for funders. So workforce organizations, as you heard, are expected to deliver long-term outcomes, but grants often don't cover the true cost of doing the work, as I mentioned before. So funders can really help here by adopting a full cost funding model that supports not just programming, but the infrastructure, staff development, employer partnerships, data systems, wraparound services that really make success possible. Also, many organizations lack resources to build strong data systems. We heard many stories about Excel spreadsheets that are being used at times to track data. So investing in data and digital infrastructure can help providers track those longer-term outcomes, improve programs, and demonstrate impact while reducing the administrative burden on staff so that they can focus more on the participants. Outside of compliance requirements, we find that there are surprisingly few professional development opportunities for workforce practitioners. So investing in practitioner learning would help strengthen the skills in coaching, employer engagement, barrier navigation, AI adoption practices, while helping organizations adapt to changing labor markets and retain their experienced staff. Next, short-term, highly restrictive funding, as Jenny talked about, makes it really hard for organizations to plan, innovate, or respond to participant needs in real time. We saw that in COVID, where suddenly workforce programs were scrambling to make sure that young adults had food and housing.
Sorry to interrupt your flow. We're at 1 minute left.
Oh,
so
we are so short on time.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we could just touch on maybe one recommendation for policymakers, and then we'll just wrap up. Oh, you're on mute. Sorry.
And so I am. So what happens when you take your finger off I would just recommend modernizing funding structures. The funding structures that we have at the state and federal and even local levels have been in place for decades and do not necessarily reflect the realities on the ground, as mentioned in the report. But you'll see, if you go back to the report, there's a lot more information behind all these recommendations. Apologies.
No problem. Thanks so much, Chris. We're just excited. There's so much, again, as we've said many times, so much that we want to share from the report. So of course, we invite you to stay connected with CSW. For more information on the report, the research, or any of our work, please feel free to reach out to Joy Briscoe. Again, she's our Director of Improving Practices and Outcomes team. I'd like to thank all the participating organizations whose insights supported the YAWLA report, my colleagues, Jenny, Chris, Alex, Joy, Jess, and Kaisha who hopped in for their time today, and all of you for being present and engaging with us. As a reminder, you can download the report, and we will be sending out this recording as well as the slide deck in a few days. Thank you all so much and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.